Welcome back to Who Are You, a CSI podcast. I am Lauren, and I have seen CSI through and through around 3 to 4 times.
And I'm Nick, and this is my first time watching these episodes.
Today, we are reviewing Season 1, Episode 16, Too Tough to Die. Director is Richard J. Lewis. Writers are Anthony E. Zeiker and Elizabeth Devine. Original air date is March 1st, 2001.
I will say that it took me most of the episode to figure out what the title was about.
Okay.
And then I think Sara says it out loud, and I went, oh.
She does, yeah.
Why didn't I get that?
This is a heavy episode. Fair warning, listeners. Heavy episode. We try to kind of keep it light. We try to put in some jokes where we can, but this is a bit of a heavy episode. So just a fair warning now. I might have to put a warning before the episode. So here's your double warning.
There's some strong things that happen in this.
There's some very strong things that happen in this episode. So we do start off with scenes of the Vegas Strip, though. So I'm curious what the Vegas score is, because I don't know the length that we spend on the Vegas Strip, but I know that we open on the Vegas Strip.
Yeah, we got 13 seconds, okay. 2 shots.
Okay.
Which is pretty standard. They're hovering around that 12-second mark for the sort of Vegas intro for a while. Yeah. Not doing as many cuts like early on episodes. They were cutting back and forth.
Yes.
So since those are both required part of the Vegas score, so we just barely hit a 3, which is I think we've been the last few episodes, but
I think you're right.
We this is pretty weak in the 3 column. Yeah, I will tell you that the last 5 episodes were 3, 3, 2, 3, and 0. When we had the zero, that was the one that opened up in the desert, I think.
Yes, I think that was the desert.
Yeah, there were 0 scenes in 0 seconds. But I will say, since we're mentioning the Vegas score, I've been kind of harping on this thing the last few episodes about all these extra Vegas location scenes and all these extra Vegas shots. They pulled back on that this episode.
Yeah, we did not really get
this
that.
This feels much more like the first 10 episodes where there was much less of that.
Yep.
So there's no asterisks for this Vegas score either. And it definitely feels less Vegas-y in the grand scheme.
Yeah. I agree. Especially compared to the last 2 episodes that were very Vegas scenery heavy. This feels very removed from that.
Yeah, those episodes reminded me of why I started tracking a Vegas score to begin with, because I felt like they were like, just so you know, this is in Vegas. I want you to know this is in Vegas. And so they still do that at the beginning, but they chilled out a little bit, and I'll be curious to see how it plays out.
Yeah, so we go to a parking garage, which could be anywhere, right? A parking garage, pretty generic, could be anywhere. We're basically following a woman to her car, and I had to note this because I noticed this on the first watch, and then I watched it on Friday, and then I watched it, today is Wednesday. I keep wanting to say today is Thursday. It's not Thursday, it's Wednesday. And then, so when I rewatched it tonight, I've said this on the podcast before, I am non-binary, but I didn't realize I was non-binary until my late 30s. So I spent the vast majority of my life living as a woman. And as she's walking to her car, there's a scene, and I wonder if they do this on purpose, where she's dangling her keys. And all I can think of was, this is a woman alone in a parking garage, and she doesn't have her keys in the defensive position where you put them through the slots of your finger so that if someone were to attack you, you can stab them with your keys. Because I have been told so many times, like, one of the things to do as a woman walking by yourself at night or in a parking garage or, anything like that is, you don't walk with your keys dangling. You walk with your keys between your knuckles. So that if someone attacks you, you can stab them.
It's interesting.
And I just felt like they very pointedly showed her dangling her keys. And I don't know if that's why they did that, but that's what it said to me, was like, oh no, you're not holding your keys in the defensive position. You are just dangling your keys as you're walking by yourself at night.
Do you want to hear a really interesting sort of aligned point to that? So I watched this episode today. I watched it yesterday. It was the first watch.
Okay.
So Wednesday, Tuesday. Because on Monday, I went out. I went to a fundraiser for the Maui fires.
Yes.
It was very good.
Yeah. Okay.
But friends of mine came out. We ended up being there pretty late. And like I was like locked out of the parking garage the way I came in. I had to find another weird way in.
Oh,
I had no idea where I was. I was wandering around this parking garage.
Oh no.
And there's nothing more vulnerable than being the only person
in a parking garage,
and realizing that any person for any reason could try to accost me right now.
Right.
It feels it's like being in the desert or the wilderness. It's like it's the urban version of that. Nobody could hear you or see you or know something was going on.
Yep.
And it is very alarming. And when I actually finally figured out where I was and where my car was, I didn't even unlock my car till I got there, even though I have a button on my remote. Because I didn't want to draw attention if there was somebody there, like some teenagers, doing whatever, hanging out, and maybe all they would do is harass me, or somebody who could be like cause any commit any other crime upon me, my persons, or my belongings, right? Or somebody who might be just mentally unstable, or somebody who might be desperate, right? There's a million reasons why you could be in an uncomfortable place, but I was like, I don't want attention. Right, it's like this, like, keep your attention. So I saw that scene, and I almost got like flashbacks watching this after being alone in a parking garage at midnight and no one around, and thinking like, I don't think anyone's even been in this parking garage for the last half hour.
Yeah,
that like this one's walking through, and she's like jingling her keys, and I'm thinking like, I would not be making extra noise.
No.
You're not trying to scare away cats here. You're trying to not draw attention to humans.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was really funny that you brought that up, because I was thinking about whether I was going to bring that up myself, that I had been in this parking garage, and I felt like, God, it's so weird being alone in a parking garage late at night. And I don't know how much of that is TV shows like this that I grew up with, where there's always people being attacked in parking garages, or like in the back seat of your car. You got to check, make sure no one's back there.
Yes, gotta make
Actually, have we had a bag over the head from the back seat of a car? Wasn't that an early episode?
No, we had someone shot from the back seat, from the back seat of the car, but not a bag over the head.
Yeah, so, I know what you did last summer style.
Yeah. So sadly, we then see her being attacked at her car. So she gets to her car, and someone comes up behind her and attacks her. We then pop on over to a couple driving. They find her body on the side of the road, realize she is alive, and which is quite a different take, as this is the 16th episode that we've watched, and this is the first real case with actually second, because we had the kidnapping victim. Quote-unquote kidnapping victim.
But they didn't find her. She was just missing, right?
No, they found her. She was buried.
Well,
not
alive. To start the episode.
Not to start the episode, that's true.
Yeah.
So we then go to Sara, Grissom, Nick, and Jim Brass at the scene. Obviously, the woman is no longer there, but they are at this crime scene. Sara is sent to the hospital to process the victim, and then we go to credits. We then go to Grissom with Catherine and Warwick. They are taking on a case that the DA can't make heads or tails of, because it has passed so many different people's hands that no one knows up from down anymore. The day guy had been working on it, but he quit, and the prelim is in 4 days. So they have like 4 days to make some sort of sense out of this monstrosity of collection of evidence.
It's kind of interesting, because we work through these cases with them, but in reality there's going to be a trial some months later, and you really do have to like translate all that information to an attorney and stuff, and that's not really part of their job. They often talk about or show a lot. And now here we have a situation where maybe things didn't go so well, and somebody bails, and it's anybody who's ever worked in any office environment knows that at some point somebody has to get it done.
True story. It's a very true story. So then Grissom pulls Catherine out in the hallway. He lets her know that Eddy has taken out a second mortgage on their house, because they're still in the process of getting divorced. They're not officially divorced, so Eddy took out a second mortgage. We then see Sara at the hospital. We learn the victim is a Jane Doe, meaning that we don't know her identity at this point. So John Doe are for male unknown victims. Jane Doe is for female unknown victims. So this is a Jane Doe.
Actually, you made me realize I should Google this. Is there a non-binary or
I very much
gender
doubt it.
neutral
I very
version
much-
of Jane Doe.
I very much doubt it. They're gonna, if they found my body, they would call me a Jane Doe, and that's fine. I understand that I am female presenting, but as far as I know, there's not, and I'd be very surprised if there was.
Apparently, they use very generic terms like person doe, subject
okay.
doe.
Subject Doe. Okay.
How about like Pat Doe?
Ashley Doe, use a name that can be either way. So we learn that the victim has 2 bullets in her brain, and then we get a kind of processing montage where Sara is processing the victim and collecting evidence, and there's just like this gentle music playing over it. There's this like I don't know how to it almost sounds like music you would hear in like doing a gentle yoga session. I found it very odd. I think it's supposed to humanize Sara in her collection of the evidence, but I just found it to be a very weird composition.
I thought they were just trying to like make it very melancholy.
Yeah, maybe that's it too. Yeah.
They try to keep you emotionally intact to the because she was obviously not going to have a lot of dialogue.
Right. Yeah, there's not much to say in this scene. So maybe that's what it is. So
I do have like one note, and I was like, they kind of gloss over this, but it's definitely going to be true that you cannot do like a sexual assault kit on somebody without identity, without a warrant. Like, I'm sure it's like a formality to get from a judge, but like they're unconscious. Yeah. Like they have family out there. They have like someone out there has the right to say yes or no.
Yeah.
And so it's so invasive. Like, could you imagine waking up and somebody did that to you without your or anyone else's permission?
Yeah.
You would still feel violated.
Yeah.
Like a second time.
That's like I mean, it's obviously a scenario that you never want to plan for, but it's also not one that falls onto general like power of attorney. Like my mom is my power of attorney, and we've had conversations as far as like, hey, if I'm in this scenario, please pull the plug and just like let me go peacefully into the night, and please don't like keep me, which does sort of kind of play into later on in this episode, but that's not a I've never had to have a conversation with my mom where I'm like, oh, hey, if it, comes up, like, let them say that they can
do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, they can do X, Y, Z testing on me if I'm unconscious. Like, that's not a conversation we've had, and we've had some, like, uncomfortable conversations, but that's not one that we've had to have. So, yeah, you're probably right, that this would not be able to be done without, at very least, an order from a judge.
And my guess is, my guess is that's the kind of thing you just get. You know what I mean? Like, you go to a judge, you get a warrant. You're like, hey, especially I don't know enough to know what the clock, like how important the timeliness is. I assume it is important. Like the sooner you do it, the better.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring that up because I also wanted to bring up the fact that I couldn't help but think, is she gonna wake up in the middle of this?
No.
And I was like, well, this show would be a very different show.
It would be a very different show if she woke up in the middle of this.
Excuse me, what are you doing?
Yeah, it'd be a very different show.
I was like, that was the inner like slapstick comedy Nick wanted to be like, it would be really funny if she just woke up right now.
Nick is like, I really need this to be a little lighter, so like if we could just have her wake up in the middle of it and have it be a haha moment, but that is not what goes down.
Really would have derailed the plot of this episode.
It definitely would have taken it in a different direction, 100%. We go to Nick Grissom and Jim Brass back at the scene where the body was found. They find casings. They also find a belt loop, which is made of denim, which is not from the victim, because that is not a material she was wearing. Yep, she wasn't wearing any denim.
This is a great hat. I should start give this a name, like halfway CSI, like where they do stuff where they clearly shouldn't be doing it. Where Grissom's like, hey, Nick, come over here, take a shot of this. And there's like the broken belt loop is under a rock.
Yes.
And he just picks the rock up.
Yeah.
I was like, wouldn't you want to take a photo of that before? Yep. Like, that rock is actually substantial evidence. A defense attorney could argue that clearly this belt loop is older because there's a big rock on it.
On top of it. Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah.
Whether or not that has validity, I don't know. But they certainly could do that. So you could potentially lose the entire piece of evidence.
Yeah.
In a situation like that.
We then have a short scene about scent pads. So they want to take the scent from the denim belt loop and save it onto scent pads to possibly use for dogs later on, which we will circle back on. They don't really talk about it all that too much at this point. We then go to
we can get there. Maybe you can harbor this, but I will say, so Grissom alludes to there being some other little catch in this scene.
Yes.
And when we finally got around to it, I was like, wait, wouldn't Brass have known that?
I think he was more so talking to Nick.
Yeah. But he was there. It was just an
Nick Brass
interesting
was there,
thing.
but I think the conversation was more towards Geared.
He was really talking to the audience is what he was doing, right? He was saying, I got a little secret for you. Stay tuned after the break.
Stay tuned, audience.
Because there was probably a commercial break right there, too.
I wouldn't be shocked. It would be a good spot for a commercial break. We then go to our other storyline with Warwick and Catherine. They're going over evidence. They have a quick talk about Eddy. And we learn that the shooter, Mikhail, and the victim, Chucky Hastings.
I thought you were going to be like, we learned that Eddy is a bad person.
Well, we already knew that Eddy was a bad person. Yes. And he's very gross later in this episode, so we can spend some time in a little while talking about how bluff he is, even though we already knew that. We're already well aware of it. So the beef that resulted in the shooting was over a motorcycle. Mikhail is saying that he defended himself. The wife of the victim is saying that Mikhail shot him in the back. And then we also learn that the screwdriver that Mikhail said that the victim lunged at him with and stabbed him with is missing. So we're missing this very critical piece of evidence in this case. Screwdriver, MIA, we don't know. Bye-bye.
That screwdriver was the biggest red herring in this whole episode.
I mean, they do circle back to it a little bit, but it ends up not being all
they don't
that.
Find it.
No, they don't find
Spoiler
it.
alert. They don't
Spoiler alert. They don't find the screwdriver. Never comes back into play.
There's a red, brand new $3,000 toolbox in the yard of this home, which is not a nice neighborhood, right? It's a poor
I think we are
situation.
supposed to believe that these people are not the most well-off individuals.
This is trailer park adjacent, right?
Yes.
I think they said that at some point.
I wouldn't be shocked if they did.
But that, I was like, that toolbox is worth thousands of dollars. So I kept thinking they're gonna search the toolbox and find, and then I think there was gonna be some weird thing, and I never really got a good grasp on where this case was going. So I don't have a real prediction, but I will tell you, any idea that I had never even remotely came close.
Okay, nice.
So
this was not a win in Nick's prediction column. So we go to Nick and Grissom with the ballistics expert. We circle back on the fact that 2 casings were left behind at the scene. And again, presto magic, their machines, they find a match to an earlier case.
Yeah.
Running it through their casings database.
I was trying to figure out, at that time, databases, I feel like they thought, were trying to figure out it was really cutting edge. But I like that part of the running into the database was loading 4 images on screen every second for as if it's actually doing image recognition that requires the screen. And it wouldn't just be running in the background somewhere. With a little
That's not fun to watch unless you need a visual representation for the TVs.
This is really going to date myself, technology-wise. Do you remember when you used to move files and Windows would open a folder and you would see the paper float through the air to another folder? Because it could take 3 minutes to move a file across your
an hour, depending on...
Or if you're moving a whole folder of music around your computer, you might as well do it before you go to bed at night.
Yeah, and hope by the time you wake up in the morning it's done.
That's what I was like. That's what they should have had. They should have had a little bullet flying through the air from one case of ammo into a gun.
Into another one.
Match found.
Match found. Clippy shows up.
Yes, Clippy.
Clippy.
A clip of ammunition.
Yeah, clip of ammunition. Exactly.
That Clippy.
Exactly. That Clippy. Yeah.
Not the paperclip Clippy.
Not the paperclip Clippy.
This is just a 9 clip chamber of 22 ammo.
Yep. So we then go to Sara in the hospital room. She finds the necklace of St. Catherine. She kind of goes on a explanation of how tough St. Catherine was, how outspoken, how she was a supporter of science, how she was brave. And we're supposed to understand that Sara is attributing these same attributes to the victim. So she is seeing the victim in St. Catherine. Grissom arrives. I found this to be a very strange scene. I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on it. So Grissom's in the hallway with this like super shocked look on his face while Sarah's leaning over the victim, promising her that she's gonna like find out who did this to her. You know, she promises, and Grissom has this like, oh, I don't know what to do about this face as he's like awkwardly standing in the hallway. Very it's a weird scene. I'm like, Grissom, and I don't think this is the actor's fault. I'm not upset at the actor here. I feel like the actor is getting very bad direction. I still think they're trying to figure out who Grissom is, and there's some struggling going on with trying to figure out who Grissom is.
There's some moments in this episode with Grissom where I'm like, what?
So I think one of those, at least for me, immediately comes up. So, you know, he's talking to Sara, and he is recognizing that Sara is fairly humanizing this living victim.
Yep.
And Grissom just looks at Sara and is like, she's evidence.
Yeah.
Like, why are you making a big deal of it, basically? She's evidence. And I'm like, wow, Grissom, that's a pretty terrible thing to say.
Yeah, that is cool. I think that like comes up a lot with like Grissom and Sara, is he just says stuff that you're just like a normal person, you just be like punch him in the face, or you know, like if you're a friend, you look at them with like a drop jaw, shocked face, and be like, do you not just say that?
You would literally be like, you're a sociopath. Like, what is wrong with you? You are a sociopath.
I will say one thing, I have to give shout out to the cinematography of this episode.
Okay.
This scene, and there's at least one other scene later that I recorded this happening. This seems to be a technique they were trying to employ. So when Grissom comes, Sara and the victim are on a green screen. You can see this little green fuzz around them.
Yeah.
Because if you were to shoot this and then have Grissom in the hallway, you could never keep them both in focus.
Right.
So I was like, I bet they do this all the time now. They're just way better at green screens.
Yeah.
Than they used to be.
Obvious.
But I was like, why does this look so alien and weird and almost space-like to me?
Yeah.
Like the way they were doing it.
Yeah, maybe that was part of why I just felt very uneasy about this scene. Like, there's something I didn't notice that part of it, but maybe that was contributing to my this scene is really off.
I think a Catherine Warwick scene later where they do this again. I didn't write that one down. But then I don't remember there being a third one. But yeah, I was like, oh, okay. Somebody thought they were really clever. They're like, oh, we're gonna use. So then you could also imagine now Grissom had to act to nothing during that scene, which is probably why he has no real change in his emotion. Right. It's up to the editor to align his mannerisms with the actual dialogue. Like maybe somebody was dry reading off the side, but it really was just a bizarre scene.
It was a very
I think it's later on. The next time Grissom is talking to Sara about this, he says something, and I have a good comment on that.
Okay. So all right. Yeah. It definitely comes back around. So we go to Catherine and Warwick arriving at their crime scene. They meet with the victim's wife. She initially claims that she saw the shooting, like she was doing laundry, but she came out, she saw the shooting, but then she kind of trips herself up, or trips up her story, in that she then tells Catherine that she heard the first shot and then ran outside and witnessed the second one. But Catherine times herself running from like the laundry room to outside, and is like, there's no way in like the time that you could get off a shot that she would have been able to make it here for the second shot. She's filling in the information. She didn't see the shooting, is their conclusion. As if like there might have been a reason he didn't immediately shoot one after another. Like there could have been something that stopped him from shooting immediately one after another.
So there's a few things here I want to talk about. So first, if you're listening to this podcast, I want you to go get a stopwatch. It took her 3.8 seconds to run outside. I want you to see how far you can get in your house jogging in 3.8 sequence.
Pretty far. Farther than you think you can.
They made it seem like she was in like a garage and it was like one door to get out there. And then she went outside. She went, click, 3.8 seconds. I went, where was this garage? How much of the house did you have to run through to get here? Because my bedroom is very far away from the front door, so when people ring our doorbell, it takes me a while to get there. Yeah. But I'm never like jogging.
Right,
You know?
right.
Unless it's a drizzly order. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so she tries out there. That was like one weird part of it. But the other part is like exactly what you said is they do this whole thing like, oh, it's a semi-automatic. You'd fire off. If you think about like bang bang as fast as you can, she didn't need to time anything. She
Right.
couldn't have made it 2 steps.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And so if it's not going to be immediate, then who cares? Like, unless it was a minute and a half, like,
Right.
how long is too long? I don't know that I know what the answer is.
Right.
But it was kind of a weird thing. They wanted, I think what they were trying to do is just have a way to say, okay, she didn't see the shot.
Yeah, that's what they were trying to get to, but this was not the best way to get around to that.
But yeah, it made it feel like, okay, this is kind of a dumb excuse.
Yeah, no, I agree. We then go back to Nick, Grissom, and Sara looking over evidence. They realize that the other case, the case involving the casings was gang related, and this is where we learn that gang shooters mark their kill by dropping their hats at the scene, and because they find a hat in the evidence that belongs to a local gang, and Sara thinks intelligently, maybe we can get some DNA off of this sweatband.
Well, it
was like a well-worn hat, so like let me go and run DNA.
Can we talk about the last episode where they went to a museum and got some hair out of a headdress that was like 40 years old?
Yes.
Yeah, if this guy wore this hat, he probably got some hair in his hat, and you could probably get some DNA.
I don't think it was hair. It was sweat from the sweatband because he
but he
wore
would
it
have had
so
hair.
often.
He would have had hair in there too.
Yeah. But
I mean, you don't
one
wash your hats.
This one they were going for sweat.
Yeah.
Then we stay on the same storyline. We have Nick, Grissom, Jim Brass, and we meet a detective from the gang unit, one detective, Sam Vega. He is inciting that possibly this had to do with gang initiation. Like, normally the gang shootings are, can stay to the neighborhood, but if this was, like, done on a totally random victim, that maybe this had to do with a gang initiation. So they...
He said that there's a couple of shootings a week.
Yes.
In a 4-block radius.
In a 4-block radius.
That's like...
That's insanity.
If you think of like a 4-block radius, so like
very small.
Think of like the face of like a Rubik's cube is 3x3, but so it's a little bit bigger. It's 4x4. Each one of like the edges is like a street, like your street that you live on, and all your neighbors that you think of as your next door neighbors. That would work out to 4 people being shot in that little section of your street every year.
Week.
That's how small a 4-block radius is.
Yep.
No, not every year. There would be 4 shot. There would be 4 people killed on your street. Not to mention 4 people killed on the street, one street over, to the north, to the south, the east, like in every direction.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way 100 people are shot at in a 4-block radius anywhere in the world that isn't a war zone. I was like, that was just like a throwaway writing line, but I was like, the math guy in me was like, wait, two shootings a week? Do you know how many shootings that is?
Like way more than there would be in this square footage of a neighborhood.
Yeah, well, it was fine if you didn't say 4-block radius.
Yeah.
Or no, I think he says a 2-block radius or something.
I think it might be 4.
Maybe I guess if it's 4-block radius, it's actually bigger. So maybe it's only one person a year shot on your street every year, and then one on the street next to you, and one on the street next to that, and one on the street.
That's still a lot.
What time it takes you to walk to the bus, you'd walk by like 9 crime scenes.
Yeah. So they canvass the neighborhood. This is when we learn that the downside of using the dogs to search for information is that you can't get a warrant from a dog search. So if a dog has to like go into a residence to get evidence, you can't get a warrant to cover that evidence gathered.
Yeah, like if the dog is the reason you went in there,
yes,
it's not. None of that evidence will be admissible.
None of that evidence is like admissible in court. So that's where we learn like, oh yeah, dogs are great, but this is why we don't use them more often. So we then go to work and Catherine talking to Mikhail and his lawyer. Catherine examines the wound from the screwdriver. The lawyer confirms, I guess it's confirming Mikhail's story that the victim was facing the client when the when her client shot him. And and after they kind of walk out and they talk about like, oh yeah, I do think he got stabbed by the screwdriver. They're talking about how losing evidence is human error. Like, this can happen, right? They're talking about like, how can you lose a screwdriver? But it's just, and it is true. Evidence changes hands so many times that it doesn't take much for human error to occur and something to happen to a piece of evidence. So as they're walking out, Catherine gets a call from Eddy. They have a short, tense conversation where she's basically telling him to rescind the second mortgage purchased on the house. We then have Warwick talking to Doc Robbins, and Warwick is questioning him about if he is entirely sure about the shooting being from the back to the front. So Doc Robbins, in his assessment, claims that both of the gunshot wounds were entered from the victim's back and then exited through the front. So they kind of have a quick conversation about this.
This is kind of hard to talk about to the very end, but I was trying to figure out a good spot. But I just want to make a sort of a mental note here. We'll come back to this.
Okay.
There's a lot of things about this case that end up, when you get to the end, you're like, wait, why didn't somebody mention this? And Doc Robbins, he's one of those people that there's something about these gunshot wounds that we will find out in a future scene.
Yes.
That I'm like, I feel like this is a more important piece of information. You would have brought this up as strange or unusual.
Yes.
And I just it's all in service of keeping the audience in the dark. But when we got there, I was like, oh, no wonder I had no idea where this was going, because they just misled you. You know what I mean? Like the things that would have made it out, usually they're really good about like consistency. Like, and you go back, and when I watch it the second time, I'm like, oh wow, yeah, they did do it. They did they did it the right way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this episode, when I watched it the second time, I went, nope. They just cheated.
They gave you nothing.
They cheated.
Yeah.
They just changed the rules at the end. And so, it's that was. But this Doc Robbins scene was one of the ones I was like. Also, I looked for his coffee machine.
Oh, his macchiato machine. Macchiato.
It may have been there, but I didn't see it.
It might have been there. I did not keep an eye out for it. So we then go to Sara searching on a computer. Grissom walks over. We learn that the DNA from the sexual assault kit taken from the victim matches the hat, but there's no like hidden CODIS or in their like DNA database to know who that DNA belongs to.
I broke in my new shoes. That's about it. What'd the lab say?
The DNA from the ball cap is a match to the semen we found in our Jane Doe, but CODIS hasn't kicked out a name.
So you're just looking at missing persons reports?
We're not having any luck finding the shooter from his DNA with a belt loop, so I thought I would at least try and identify the poor woman before she dies.
So Sara is actively trying to ID the victim because she can't ID the suspect at the moment.
I think she gets way too much flack for this, by the way, in the scene.
Way too much flack.
They should for sure be doing this.
Yes.
Imagine how much you can learn about this case if you can properly ID the victim.
Because
they don't have motive.
In all honesty, the vast majority, and this ends up not being the case in this crime, but in the vast majority of crimes, the person who commits the crime against you is someone you know.
Yep. And I know they have this.
It's very slight where it's like a totally random attack. Generally speaking, you are attacked by somebody that you know. And so it would make sense to identify the victim, to find out if like they have an angry ex-boyfriend or they have an angry ex-husband or, whatever it is that could possibly be a suspect in this case.
Yep. So I know like also that they have this whole other gang, like older case that they're following up on.
Yes.
But there's no reason to think that this is a random gang initiation thing too. That it could just happen to be the same person or the same weapon, because there's actually no reason to believe it's the same person.
Right.
Or if the weapon has been bought and sold.
Right.
Like in a shady black market type situation.
Yeah.
And so like you still want to figure out who the victim is, because some of the suspects and motives are going to be informed by the more you know about this person.
Yes, 100%. Yep. And so Grissom instead like you're saying, sort of like shame Sarah about this, that she's trying to ID the victim. And he's asking her if she has any diversions. They kind of make her seem like a petulant child here. And I don't mean that as a slight against the actor or against the character. I think they do. I think, again, this is another episode where they're not doing right by Sarah Seidel. They are really
Sarah
not
dirty.
They are doing Sarah dirty, and it really upsets me. And they basically paint her out to be, you know, obsessed with her work in a negative way, and look at this woman that has no life outside of her career. How dare she be so focused on her career? We would be cheering if this was a guy so dedicated to his career.
I feel like Grissom, they already like have him pegged as the guy who's too obsessed with his career.
I know.
And he's over here being like, do you have a diversion? And he's like, my diversion is riding roller coasters by myself, crying to myself after I bribed the guy to let me ride alone at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Not going to therapy.
He's not exactly
needed therapy.
That's not healthy. Your solution is bad. And then it's like what kind of, there's this whole thing with, it's like what does you think you're gonna like accomplish by some like random hobby? Yeah, it was so, Grissom is not the person to be having that conversation, because he's the person who needs more diversions in his life. His obsession, and he says about roller coasters. I think there's something about his bugs,
and he said nothing about his crossword puzzles.
Oh yeah, well he only kind of likes to do the semi-hard crossword puzzles on Sunday.
Yeah, not the genius level, but.
Yeah, I do also have to say that the whole Sarah, you're obsessed with work and everything, stands in stark contrast to calling her in on her one day off when she just wanted to sleep.
She literally can't win. She tried, like, you call her in on her only day off, and then you're like upset that she's upset about having to be in on her only day off, and then you're angry that she like always clocks in overtime. And pick one. Which one do you want?
Oh god, why can't I remember this phrase? What's it called when you like tell somebody something that's not true and then try to convince them?
Gaslighting.
Yeah, they're gaslighting Sarah. It's like, I was like, oh, you work too much. You call me on my day off.
Yeah, you called me on my day off.
How can you not have any hobbies? Because you make me work. It's like
7 days a week.
Yeah, like you max out your overtime. I was like, you're her boss, man. Yeah. You don't have to approve the overtime.
Stop calling her in on her day off, and then maybe she doesn't have to max out her overtime every month.
Yeah, no, this whole scene is like in bad taste and in bad execution.
Yep. And again, nothing against the actor. Like, I think she acted well in this scene. I just think how this scene was composed was horrible. So we go to the other storyline with Warwick and Catherine looking at the shirt. They realize that there is unburned gunpowder, which leads them to some target practice. And in target practice, they realize that the distance between the first shot was 2 feet, but the distance for the second shot was only 1 foot, which contradicts everybody's story. Like, this contradicts all the stories. All the stories should say that the second shot should be further away than the first.
And of course, we know which shot was the first shot, which was the second shot, because Doc Robbins said so.
Because Doc Robbins said so.
Okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure I'm clear.
Yeah.
They never explained that.
Yeah, nope, they don't. Just go with it. Just go with it. We then go to Grissom making the decision to use the dogs for tracking. Nick thinks that Grissom is rushing it for Sarah, so we have a very quick scene in the hallway between the two of them. We then see Sarah still searching, even though she had told Grissom she was going to stop.
Yep.
Obviously she didn't, and she's like pouring a ton of sugar into her coffee. And she comes across a listing for Pamela Adler. I don't know why that name is tripping me up so badly. And we realize that is our victim, is Pamela Adler, and she was out shopping. So we then kind of keep following this storyline. We go to the canines, sniffing and searching. Nick has to end up chasing after them. After, doing their jobs and being good boys and girls, they end up targeting a kid who is playing basketball. His name is Tony, and crazy enough, he's missing a loop on his denim pants.
So we have a Spot the Guest Star here.
It's been a while since we've had a Spot the Guest Star.
It has. So Tony, have you ever heard of the show Leverage?
No,
He's one of the main characters, which is another sort of... Leverage is like a bunch of people who are like fraudsters who work together and like do good. I watched It's a USA t-shirt.
And again, I think we've talked about this on earlier episodes. So sometimes, I mean, there will be very obvious, like, spot the guest stars that I know are coming, that I'm going to be like, I know that this is a guest star. But part of my problem is that I have seen this show so many times that I don't know if someone looks familiar to me because I recognize them for someone else, or just because I've seen this episode 3 or 4 times and they just look. And the other problem is, and I realized this, I was going to say spot the guest star with the McHale guy, because he's been on like every CSI show. And I've seen every CSI show, so I probably recognize him from being on CSI New York and being on CSI Miami and being on Bones and like all of these criminal shows. That
a lot of these people are on a lot of these different shows.
Yes, and that's why I was like, that's probably where.
Sometimes you try to like confirm, and I'm like, I do know this person, and they're like, I know him from this one thing, but they were also on 95 other things.
Yes.
But also, in addition to Leverage, he's on something.
77 episodes.
Yeah, he's a main character. He's like one of the top, the 4 or 5 main characters.
Okay.
But also, very recently, and this is sort of like the spot the guest star. I was like, it's the guy from Leverage. When I saw this, The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, was in a recent comic book movie called Black Adam.
Yes.
And this guy, he plays Hawkman. Which is now he wears a mask for like most of it.
For most of it, okay.
But you can imagine being like, wait, do I know who this guy is? Because he's wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And then he's like seeing with the mask. I was like, I do know the guy. It's the guy from Leverage. So I saw him, and he's so young in this compared to what I know him from. But yeah, and then I also I did look at his IMDb. He's in an episode of Star Trek Short Treks, which I've never seen or heard, and I was like, what is this? And I clicked on it. Is this like Strange New Worlds before Strange New Worlds?
Yes and no. It's I have not seen it.
Oh, okay.
But it's like, it's like sort of like short stories about certain characters to kind of give you backstory on certain characters, but it's related to Discovery and Strange New Worlds, I think. Yeah,
it's very interesting. There's a couple other things in his IMDb where it's like 20 episodes of this, including something very recently which has Kevin Bacon in it and is set in Boston. Which, if you don't know, Lauren and I are the greater Boston area.
We are.
Well, Lauren
now I'm further away from it.
Lauren until recently was much closer to the greater Boston area.
I was very close to the greater Boston area, and I am not as close, but I'm still reasonably close.
But yeah, City on a Hill is another show, which I don't know what thing it was on, but he's the second billed star after Kevin Bacon, which is a hard thing to get on top of. That was a Showtime show, apparently. I never watched a single episode.
So that's our
spot the guest star
for this week.
I didn't know if you would know him. I was kind of like waiting
I had a moment where I was like, he looks familiar, but does he look familiar because I have seen this episode 3 or 4 times?
Yeah, it's not super big. I wasn't sure where it was going to come down.
Yeah.
It made me think about also that like a lot of the things I think are going to fall into spot the guest star would be interesting, because not only is this show like 20 years old, but like, where am I going to know these people from? Are they going to be bigger stars when I knew them, like because they grew up into something else, or like, is it not going to be really a thing because most of the shows I watched were around this time anyways, or shortly before? Yeah. So we're not going to have a lot of small characters who are in things that I watched growing up.
There's one spot the guest star that I'm super excited about, but it's not until like the 13th or 14th season, so we have a long ways until we get to it. But I think you're going to be able to pick up who it is, but it's I'm very excited about it.
It could be 5 years from now. So.
It could be 5 years from now.
I mean, just doing the math, we probably need to get to like 3 seasons a year. That would be like 60 weeks or something.
Yeah.
So it could take a while.
It could take a while, but I'm just saying
but when we get there,
there's one coming much later in the series that I'm very excited for. So we head back over to the other storyline with Catherine and Warwick. They are working with a self-healing dummy. They're, staking him through to show where the gunshot wounds, the trajectory. Thank you. I was like, trajectory of the bullets. And this is another CSI really needs an HR intervention because Warwick is standing behind the dummy trying to like get it angled in an appropriate action, and yes, it looks somewhat sexual. So then Catherine takes a picture and is like, ha ha ha, like, look what I have of you doing with this dummy. And I'm like, what is going? But this somehow wakes something up in both of their brains, which to the audience, we have no clue what's going on.
It's not obvious. It's not obvious from the shot.
It is not obvious at all from the shot.
I think they should have blocked that scene better and put Warwick in like the position.
Yes.
Like where he was in front of him, or
Yep.
like and even like put a hand on him or something.
Yeah.
But
And then you could have been like, oh yeah, but I will say, even rewatching this episode and knowing what the ending was, I was like, this scene really does not illuminate anything. It does for them, but for the audience, we're left like, what? Like, what are we missing here?
Yeah. So let me get into this. So I actually, in that moment, understood that he shot him in the back by being on top of him.
Yeah.
Because, like, I think, fighting with my brothers growing up or something, you often, and when you're fighting with somebody, end up with somebody hunched over.
Yeah.
Right, and someone's on top, and you're punching them in the back or something. Especially in sort of the scrappy, like, don't punch each other in the face kind of way that you fight with your brothers or your friends, right? But the other thing that happened in this scene that was kind of weird. So this goes back to the Doc Robbins comment. These angles of these shots are so bizarre.
Yes.
Why would this not be something you called out in a report or talked about?
Right.
When you think about like the guy's walking away and you're shooting him in the back, how are you going to shoot him from the top of his shoulder through his body down and out like at his waist?
Yeah.
Like you would have to be jumping 20 feet in the air to make that shot. So, and also like, and so it's like if you're the person who's involved, they make kind of like an offhanded comment about this, but like we said, I shot him face to face. If you had like had somebody like bent over and you shot them, like you wouldn't have said I shot them in the front, right? You should have fighting. I was kind of on top of him and I shot him in the back. Like you would have known you shot him in the back. So like in order to have the mystery, they kind of just kept ignoring all of these facts is what I feel like.
Yeah.
And so on the second watch through, knowing it and seeing all the scenes, I was like, CSI, you have done a much better job with stuff like this before, where I've gone back and been impressed. Not this time. I am not impressed. But yeah, and then in this scene, so like I did like the dummy and the little lines through it. I think that was cool. That was something we hadn't seen before. Yeah. It was very helpful. But yeah, I think they really could have blocked that scene better, where they literally just had Warwick sort of, even if accidentally, being there. And then I also unfortunately have to admit that I thought it was really funny when Catherine took a Polaroid.
Yeah.
And it also made me. I don't think Polaroids were even that big in 2000 anymore.
Think so.
I mean, digital cameras weren't that big. It's mostly like the CVS drop off your camera.
Yeah.
And get like pay an extra $1 to get doubles.
Yep. Oh yeah.
But
I definitely had a bunch of disposable cameras at my 21st birthday party, just strewn about so that people could take, pictures as they wanted to.
But people had digital cameras, but not a lot.
We head on over to Nick and Sara watching Grissom and Jim Brass interrogating Tony. They are talking about the missing belt loop on his pants. We also learn, and I really, really need to organize my watching better, because I don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly this investigation counts as a murder if the victim dies within a year and a day of the shooting.
Yeah.
Which sounds not true, because what if they get hit by, like, a car crossing the street? Like, and it just happens to be 6 months after this happens. Like, I feel like there has to be more legal jargon to this than...
I think the idea is that, like, if she dies within a year because of that, then it's murder. If it goes beyond that, then it just becomes kind of, like, unrelated. Her death becomes unrelated.
Yeah. But Tony doesn't seem to really care that much. He's a juvie. She's not dead. He doesn't seem upset about the situation whatsoever. We then go to Eddie bringing Lindsay to HQ, and once Warwick takes Lindsay off to, play some video games, Catherine and Eddie have a conversation, and this is where Eddie says that the only thing that he robbed Catherine of was good sex. He's like, the only thing I've ever robbed you of was good sex. And I was like,
Was he trying to flex there, or just admit he's bad in the bedroom?
You're terrible in the bedroom if you have to say that you're good in the bedroom.
Well, no, he's not even saying he's good. He's saying he robbed her of good sex, meaning he didn't provide it.
I think he means
she
now.
was good.
I think he means that now he's not providing it.
I wanted her to have a much better comeback.
But I like your take on this situation. That he didn't allow her to have good sex for a long time because she was only having sex with him because he seems like a selfish and terrible lover from these conversations.
Oh yeah, he's probably drunk half the time.
Yeah. So Eddie ends up grabbing her. Grissom breaks it up. Of course, Eddie has to turn around and say like, "Oh, I always knew you and Catherine had a thing," instead of just accepting that he's being a dick and Grissom is breaking it up. We then go to Sara and Nick processing evidence. Sara is singing. I bring it up because I don't think this is ever brought up in later episodes, so this is not like Sara sings and that becomes a normal part of her character. I don't think this is like ever brought up again. I just found it again strange. I feel like a lot of things were strange in this episode, and I felt like this was a strange detour from what was going on. But they realize that the belt loop lines up. So the belt loop that they found at the scene matches the pants that they took from Tony interrogation. We then go to...
I was really this is the worst fiber matching scene under.
Oh yeah, because you like a good matching scene.
They really went for it in the first few episodes. And this time they were just like, no, it checks out.
Yeah, imagine.
It's perfect. Like perfect match. I was like, you didn't show me anything. Yeah. I want to see the exact ripped fibers lining up.
That's fair. We then go to Catherine and Warwick with the DA. This is where we learn how the shooting actually happened, wherein the victim lunged at the shooter, and so he shoots down because the guy was lunging at him. So the first shot was in self-defense because the guy was lunging at him. He shoots down, and that's why it was through the back, out through the front. But the second shot was not in self-defense because he was already going down. So he was like falling down from the first shot, and he went and shot him again in the back. So first shot, self-defense. If it had stopped there, he would have been in the clear, but because he shot him again, it was not self-defense, it's murder.
Yeah.
Very unsatisfying. Very unsatisfying end to this storyline.
That scene where they're like, oh, well, they had to shoot him like the second time, there would be a pause. Now we're thinking about the fact that the shots were not bang bang. You know what I mean? Despite the fact that we had all this other evidence before.
Yes, he had a moment to like wait and realize that he was going down, he was no longer a threat, and he shot him again. So there was a delay between the first shot and the second shot.
And I totally get that they're going to try to prosecute him. I think this guy's getting off in the real world. Because they're still missing evidence. They mishandled it, and now they're going to go in court and they're going to say, oh, the first shot was for sure in self-defense. Yeah. And then they're going to say, well, the second shot wasn't, and the crossing attorney is going to get up there and say, you don't know if that second shot was a fraction of a second later.
Right.
You don't even know if it was accidental.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like he was still fighting to get alive. I was trying to pull the gun away. He, knocked I didn't even mean to shoot him the second time,
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to disclose all this, and so that guy getting away. But also, I feel like this is the reason why there are juries. I think that there are going to be people on a given jury who are going to think about that situation. We were fighting, sure. He literally attacked me with a screwdriver. And then you're going to tell me that the first shot's okay, and that's really self-defense. But
shot's not.
But I'm not allowed to still be angry and trying to defend myself.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to know that was enough
to put him down.
When I'm bleeding out, filled with adrenaline. There are going to be people who are like, you know what? I hear what you're saying, prosecutor, but I don't think that's that's murder. And that's why we have juries, because it takes a bunch of people to think about these complex situations in a reasonable fashion.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what would happen. They're not really getting into all of the evidence that they'll get into in trial, but we've had a couple of these where they're like, "Oh yeah, it's a win for us," and I'm like, "Is it?"
You're like, really?
Is it?
You think so? You think that's
I was like, good for you, I guess. I don't know.
They're just really optimistic. So we head back to storyline A with Sara talking to Pamela, who is obviously still in a vegetative state. Tom, her husband, is creepily in the corner, but then it's not creepy that he's there. I felt like it was a very weird introduction to him being there.
It's weird.
He was like just sitting silently in the corner while Sarah's talking to Pamela, and then he's just like, "You must be Sara," and I was like, "Oh."
It's weird. It's probably also a little weird to him that this person he doesn't know is in there talking to his unconscious wife.
Yeah. So she ends up giving the necklace of St. Catherine to Tom, and Tom seems really appreciative of everything that Sarah's done, and he wants her to come see them in the rehabilitation center that she's going to be transferred to. So we then go to Sara crying to Grissom. She's upset because she realizes that the husband doesn't get it. That it's not like...
I didn't
she's
get
going to be in a
either.
vegetative... Yeah, like she's going to be in a vegetative state. She's not going to get better. This is, not how this is going to go. And Sarah's also upset that Tony Thorpe is, will be out of juvie in 48 months. Grissom, not expressing any emotion, is basically like, well, you gotta learn to live with it. You gotta learn to let it go. Like, what's the big deal? And Sara, again, and I think I've said this in earlier episodes, I will say this in later episodes, Sarah's probably one of my favorite characters, so I also feel like I need to defend her sometimes, especially in these earlier episodes when I feel like they're trying to paint her in a bad way, but I don't think she should be painted in a bad way. Tells Grissom, like, well, I wish I didn't feel anything. Which, fair. Like, your job
Shots
is
fired. That's what that's my last note. Shots fired.
Yes. Like, must be nice to just be able to, like, turn those emotions off and just do your job totally analytically and with no, cares.
I want her to be like, my diversion is giving a rat's.
It's not riding roller coasters by myself and crying, okay?
Yeah. I would love it if, like, 5 episodes from now, she's like, Grissom, you need a diversion.
That'd be great. I don't think it happens, but...
I think she's as passive-aggressive as I am.
All right, so
I do have to say I did look up a year and a day rule.
Okay.
Is kind of maybe a thing.
Okay.
It's a common law English thing.
Okay.
There are some notes there's a Wikipedia article about it, so it's enough of a thing for there to be Wikipedia article. There is some allusion to it being a successful defense at different times, but also like being struck down or extended, and there's a good note at the end that basically that there's such a difference in medicine today compared to when we think of where English common law comes from.
Yeah.
That it's much more likely that somebody could survive. Like,
Yeah.
the Pamela could die 2 years from now, and you should be able to still charge them with murder. So
yeah.
I guess that's a real thing. I don't know if that was a thing in Vegas at that time, but I think they mentioned one thing in the article that as recently as 2003, the Supreme Court upheld the year of Wisconsin upheld the year-to-day rule.
Okay.
In a case before it.
Okay.
But then literally abolished it for future cases. They're like, all right, last time, guys. Okay.
Yeah. Like, we'll let it slide this time, but then that's it.
And
all right.
There's some weird rule. There's some weird note here about the President Reagan's assassination.
Oh, fair.
And I guess maybe when he died, they put his cause of death 33 bullets, or the bullets fired from 33 years ago.
Oh, jeez.
Which is like a weird piece of trivia.
Yeah, that's strange. So I know we've talked about it a bit throughout the episode, but Nick, what were your thoughts on this episode overall?
I think the first time I watched this episode, I was a little bit more middle of the road, and then I watched it again, and it only went down. For a lot of the stuff I've talked about before, where I was like, I kind of was giving them, I think, the benefit of the doubt. You know what I mean? There are moments in this episode that I really like, But on the whole, like, this would not make it into my list of episodes to rewatch. If I was like surfing TV and this came on, I would flick to the next channel.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think I'm also not thrilled with this episode. I think a big part of why I love CSI is because of the characters, and I feel like overall the characters are either downplayed or done really dirty by CSI. Like, Grissom comes off looking like a sociopath. Sara is villainized for caring about a victim. And then Nick and Rourke are just kind of like there.
Yeah, I was about to say, Nick is
expecting
hardly in this episode.
Yeah.
They've been really like putting him in the back burner.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Catherine's probably the only one that like gets some decent, like, you know, we get a
Even
little bit
the
more.
Catherine
of her.
Eddy scenes were kind of weird. This
They were
episode.
uncomfortable.
I think they did a
and-
much better job of those in earlier episodes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I had this feeling at the end of this episode that I really look forward to season 2 now, because a lot of this show like blew up. I remember this being a show that blew up, and I've looked at the ratings before, and I think at this point they're just trying to get an episode out every week because it's one of the biggest shows in CBS.
Yeah.
But next year they will have time to work on the plot and the character development. They will spend time between seasons, and they will have all the money they need to do it because the network will write them a blank.
We'll let them have it.
They're going to be an 8 o'clock slot, and they're going to be one of the number 1 shows in the network next year.
Yeah.
So I think that what we're going to see is all the good things from the current writers, and they're going to have people to help fix and really figure things out. But they also have had time to breathe and think on it, which is probably something that they've been missing.
Yeah.
Right? And so, we'll have to see. I'm sure there'll be other great episodes this year, but knowing how long this show went on for, knowing that people like you like the show passionately, I have a feeling there would be a decent step up in overall quality, I think, in later seasons.
Yeah.
And so now I get kind of excited for that because I do like the show most of the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like some of the episodes I'm kind of like, eh. And I really learn a lot by watching it for a second time. Like, you really learn like whether, I feel like this episode I started to watch a second time. I was like, oh, I have to watch it again because we're recording tonight. And I was like, oh, this episode. I was like, this episode is not an episode that deserves a second watch. And I want that basically summarized how I feel about this episode. That's more fair than I thought. And then when I was watching it and everything that I was looking or hoping for, it wasn't there. I was like, oh, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I was like, I almost always have notes from the second watch through. I have like no notes from the second watch through.
Yeah.
Because it's always weird because I've gotten into this habit of leaving big blank spaces in my notes.
Yeah, so you can fill
so
it
I
in.
can keep them organized because otherwise it's too hard.
Yeah.
Or I'll do like a left and right page. It depends. But this time it's like there's so much empty space on my notebook because I never wrote anything between the margins.
Well, we'll see how we feel about next week's episode. We'll be back with season 1, episode 17, Facelift. And in the
This is
meantime,
not a Nip Tuck crossover.
it is not. No, definitely not. In the meantime, you can find us on Facebook at a CSI podcast. You can find us on Twitter/X, unless Elon Musk starts charging for it, and then we're not going to be on there anymore. We'll see how that goes, but for now we're on there. You can find us there on Instagram or Threads at whoareyoucsipod. You can also reach out to us via email at whoareyoucsipod@gmail.com. And feel free to use the hashtag whoareyoucsipod to get our attention on social media and maybe get a shout out on the show. We'll see. So that's it, and we'll see you next week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.